There we go. Now it's recording. All right, Kunal, welcome to the Backstory. I'm really excited to have this conversation with you. I've been following your work probably over the past year or even more, and I know it's going to be very valuable to my listeners. So I appreciate you making the time to being here today.
Thank you for having me on. I'm excited for this conversation.
So you go kind of on social media by KMac. What do you want me to call you? Kunal, KMac? What do people refer you to?
Yeah, to be honest, I haven't been called Kunal in a long time. Everyone, like even my team members, will still be like, "Oh, K-Mac said this." But yeah, usually I don't mind either one, whichever you feel comfortable with.
Fair enough. So, I wanted to kind of go into who you are, what kind of your backstory is, how you got into this space, and then specifically on what your program entails. I mean, I'm going to share the links with all the listeners and the viewers, and the changes that you've made in many of your clients' lives is unbelievable. I mean, you guys have to see these pictures. It's fantastic. So I want to just kind of go into what that looks like in terms of the different phases of your program and things like that. But first, K-Mac, tell me about you. Tell me about where you're from, what your background is, and kind of how you got into this space.
Yeah, it depends on how long we got into the podcast. But yeah, long story short, Kunal, I'm basically a founder of K-Mac Fitness. We're a company based in London, and we predominantly focus on a lot of like South Asians. It was accidental from a viewpoint of like I originally wanted to be an athlete growing up. So even before that, like my dad died when I was younger, from lung cancer, and that kind of really shaped my thinking into health and well-being. Growing up South Asian, there's probably listeners here thinking, you're kind of into a couple of fields. Would be like you're either a doctor, you're either a dentist, lawyer, accountant, and those were the arenas we were in. And at a very young age, I was very stubborn, and I was like, you know what, I need to be an athlete, and that's what I wanted to be. However, the issue was I didn't have like my mom growing up, obviously single parent household. My mom was trying to make it. She's trying to feed me and my brother, and he's like, she doesn't care about me becoming an athlete. She's like, your education should be the main priority versus anything else. So, long story short, I was like, I need to take control of this. So, from the age of 16, I was only studying sports. So like that's all I cared about, when it came down to like professional athletes and so on. And then I think when it was about I graduated from, you guys would call it high school, graduated from high school, and I wanted to basically become a sports psychologist. That was my background is actually in sports psychology. That was my undergrad. And I was like, what intrigued me was I saw an athlete, as well as well, we watch obviously a lot of football here. You guys call it soccer. And we saw this guy called Fernando Torres miss an open goal. And I was like, holy crap, his whole mental state just went down. And I was like, man, I would love to help someone like him from a psychological perspective. And one of my teachers was like, dude, just go and do sports science instead. And I was like, nah, I'm going to do sports psychology.
Right.
But as I started doing sports psychology, I loved it. However, I was like, I know the science of anatomy and physiology. So why don't I apply it to myself initially? And I did that. Went to the gym, changed my physique just by like following science. And, thank God for science. And my best friend, who's part of the business right now, is always one of our coaches. He goes to me, Kunal, can you help me? Because I used to post everything on Snapchat. Like, you know how Instagram stories are right now?
Right.
I used to post everything on Snapchat like a decade ago. Every day would be my food on this like Android phone. You could barely see what was going on.
All right.
And it'd be like avocado, it'd be fish, it'd be veggies, and so on. And he goes, can you help me out? I was like, yeah, sure. He must have lost 20 pounds straight away. Now, I wouldn't recommend what I like told him because it was basically like a keto style diet.
Mhm.
And we made plenty of mistakes growing up, which was great because it's kind of led to my foundation here. And then as soon as that happened, I was like, wow, this is quite powerful. And I was like, I would love to do this with South Asians. I love to work with like basically South Asians who don't have the help because I was like, I saw more South Asians at the gym than any other race around me. And I was like, there's no one there to help them or there's no understanding. And in 2017, I decided I was like, this is my path. I got qualified in nutrition and personal training, whatever. And then since then, this has been like my baby basically. And I started this business. I worked for another company, and then I started my own business in 2020 as well. And that's like the foundations.
When you kind of think back and look at your childhood, certainly living in a single parent home is challenging. Putting food on the table is obviously a priority. When you kind of look back, and I'm Indian, I'm South Asian, and I know what kind of food my mom fed me. It
Yeah.
was very high in butter and ghee and rotis and breads. I mean, this is what I grew up with. I didn't really pay attention to what a carb or a protein or a fat was. Whatever's on the table, I kind of ate. What was your childhood like in terms of the diet and the food that was put on your table?
It was terrible. I mean, cereals were always like for breakfast. And then for lunch again, like it would be either at school you'd get like these meals being given, or my mom would basically pack a sandwich. There would obviously be no protein in it. Like honestly, at one point I remember it was like Nutella sandwiches. So it'd be like Nutella spread, and that was it. And we'd come home and it'd be like these like little cakes with milk.
Yeah.
And then in the evening, it would be another like big old meal. It'd be any curry, it'd be roti, it'd be more rice than anything else. So like looking back on it as a kid, maybe 12, 13 years old, I may be consuming 3,000 plus calories quite easily. Like I remember, like obviously, thank God for me being active even at that age, but like, you know, even now I see this in England, even in the US with kids, like obesity now obviously on the rise. I was trending on that same path easily. In
Yeah,
my
I totally agree with you. Yeah, I don't remember a meal growing up where there wasn't rice or roti. I mean, every meal had rice. Luckily, in Punjabi, we ate a lot of chicken, so I guess we got the protein in. But playing sports probably put some of the obesity risks a little bit, decrease that risk just because we were active and we were moving around a lot. But you see those kids who don't move around a lot and don't exercise and still have the same diet that we did growing up. But to your point, the Nutella sandwiches, that sounds like my son. That's my son's favorite food. He's 4 years old. That's what he likes, cakes and snacks, but certainly we try to balance him. Actually, about my son, he's 4. We have a protein shake every morning. So he always has like a third of my protein shake before school. So hopefully I'm putting him on the right track. So once you kind of started KMAC and you said, you know what, I'm going to focus on South Asians, which I totally respect. And I think there is an opportunity for us, even in medicine. One of the reasons for this podcast, for my newsletter, is I always struggled with, I used to see patients in the office after the fact of something. They were overweight and maybe they got hurt, or they hurt their spine, or they hurt their joints. And like, we didn't have any opportunity to intervene before for preventative health, especially in the United States and our healthcare system. We are great at treating problems. There is not much incentive in preventing health problems, which I struggle with, conceptually and ethically. So I think that's why speaking with you and kind of sharing with the audience, here are ways to prevent injury. I don't want to see everyone. Honestly, I don't want to see people. If people are healthy and staying out of my office, I think we're doing the world a favor. So going back to KBAC, you started focusing on South Asians. And what did you notice? What did you kind of gather from all those people you saw at the gym? What were they all kind of doing wrong?
I think obviously it was the lack of, if I should say. So, we didn't grow up with, like, you either grew up with playing sports or you didn't play sports, right? Is one or the other. Like, if you were like, I grew up playing a lot of sports. So for me, I found like a lot of love for the gym, and I kind of understood the mentality behind it very, very quickly. I think as South Asians, we love watching sports, right? I know so many of my clients who go to, the Super Bowl, they'll spend a crazy amount of tickets, they'll go to March Madness right now, etc. Like they'll do all of that, but they just didn't play enough of it growing up. So initially I realized like people weren't as active, number one. So where there was movement, just looking at things like steps, you being in New York, I mean, New York, London are very similar when it comes down to step counts, I think. Protein amounts were probably like on average, like a male client that we saw was probably consuming less than 80 grams of protein a day, which was significantly low. I mean, if you're a vegetarian, it may be even lower than that. And then on top of that, like every single one, and again, this is me generalizing, were probably on the skinny fat range more than anything else, which by the way makes it even harder because what tends to happen to these individuals is they need to lose more body fat initially, but then it's like, but on the outside, you may look at that person and think they've got nothing to lose. They look okay. But then you see them, you see the pictures, you do analysis, and you're like, holy crap, you're probably 25% body fat right now, right? But the arms are really small. You know what I'm talking about when you see them, and you're like, damn, this is crazy. Because I've seen people in person, and I'm like, hey, you should be okay. But then you see their pictures, and you realize, okay, wow, they're carrying way more body fat, and we carry way more visceral body fat than I found than any other. Again, I know we're a South Asian dominant company, but we still have a lot of white people in our Caucasians. We still got loads of black people in our system, and they can lose 5 pounds and they look completely different. You with South Asians, they need to lose 10 pounds. 10 pounds is just the beginning. I always tell people.
I love your use of the phrase skinny fat. I mean, my wife and I talk about this concept in general because there's so much value put on the superficial aesthetic. and the number on the scale. You know, those are the two metrics. You look at your mirror, my pants fit, you look at the number on the scale and say, okay, I'm healthy. But it tells you so little about what's going on inside the body. You know, a couple of weeks ago, I recorded a podcast on these scales, these bioimpedic electric scales that tell you visceral body fat, skeletal muscle. Maybe a DEXA scan would be more sensitive to that. So I appreciate you using the phrase skinny fat, because it's really just not about what you look like on the outside. It's we have to treat the inside. You know, you mentioned movement and diet. Tell me about how you value those and where you think more emphasis should be placed when it comes to living a healthier lifestyle. How much of a diet, how much of it is exercise, whether it's aerobic or resistance, which we'll get into in a second.
Yeah. So I always tell people I've got this thing called the Holy Trinity. So the Holy Trinity for me is nutrition is number one, strength training, resistance training is number two, and then movement is number three. But we do all three within our programming. And nutrition for us is probably number one because ultimately, you know, it's the quickest way to get a result, number one. Number two, if there is like a health problem and so on, there's more chance if you can manage your nutrition, then you can manage like potentially a health problem. So i.e. cholesterol, diabetes, and so on. And we've had several clients who've actually, one of our clients, Pooja, she came to us and her LDL was quite high. And by month 7, she had her lowest LDL in 25 years. Right. And I remember she goes, what do you think it was? And I was like, resistance training, and your protein was probably higher than, we know it's higher than it's ever been previously. So that's how I look at it as a chart, because I feel like, nutrition is a lot of people, and in the States, a lot of people will go and do the other two really well. In fact, they'll do more of it. So the Orange Theories, the F45s, I know people right now who are like training 6-7 days a week. And I'm like, whoa, that's a bit too crazy. Right. I don't think you need to do that. But then the nutrition is like, it is nowhere to be seen. And I think sometimes, you can't outwork a bad diet, as we already know. But I think a lot of times people are like, hey, I'm young, I'm like 35, it's fine. As long as, I train 6-7 days a week, then I'll be okay. It does something okay, but then not a lot of people also get labs as well. If they get labs done and they see, wow, okay, my my cholesterol's through the roof, or this is what's going on, they'll get a bigger picture for it. But to answer your question, it's nutrition, strength training, and then for me, movement.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think, especially in the United States, we put a lot of emphasis on what we call cardio or aerobics. I mean, you go to the gym and you have 400 treadmills and bikes and things like that, and maybe a small section for resistance training. I think things are changing as you see more modern gyms getting developed. They're putting more emphasis on resistance training and muscle work and a little bit less on cardio. But you made a good comment there. You can't overtrain a bad diet. What did you say? You can't run through a bad diet. What does that mean to you?
I know. So to put it into context, when I first got into the industry, obviously it took me a year to kind of just get qualified and stuff. And I remember I love observing in the gym. And where I'm at is a predominantly South Asian area. We call it mini India. Wembley, Harrow, for anyone who's listening is from here, shout out to you guys. And I remember being in the gym one day, and there's this one guy who'd always work the hardest. I'm talking about dripping in sweat. Just, I was like, respect to this guy. But he looked the same every single, like for about 3 months straight, he looked exactly the same. But there's this other guy who never hopped into the treadmill, but completely changed within 3 months. And I was like, what could be the difference here? And I knew straight away his nutrition. And one day I walked out of the gym, this guy who was sweating like crazy came out. We have a Costa coffee right next to that gym, and he had a muffin next to his hand. And I was like, there you go. That's probably his answer. He's probably overworking in the gym, and he's going to be like, you know what? I'm going to have a croissant. I'm going to have a muffin. I'm going to have something that as a reward because I felt good about this training session, right? Whereas the other guy probably he's never done a cardio session. Again, this is me generalizing. Probably didn't do a cardio session, but probably got lost more body weight in a short period of time compared to the other guy who's trying his hardest as well at the same time. So I think with the nutrition, it allows you to work smarter versus, hey, let's go burn 1,000 calories every single session, because realistically you're going to burn out very, very quickly.
Right. And even that, the calorimeter on those treadmills and step machines aren't super accurate anyway. So you give yourself this false sense of confidence of, yeah, I burned 1,000. Let me go eat a slice of pizza. Life's about balance, but maybe it's not really balanced when you look at those metrics. Let's talk about nutrition. So we have a calorie. Is a calorie not a calorie? What was your stance on macros, caloric intake, and how do you kind of balance all that?
Great question. So we predominantly use like calories and macros as a way of working with our clients. There's obviously some like I've got my own coach, and he's like, we don't count calories. And I'm like, okay, interesting. But then again, I don't mind like understanding why. And his approach is very much like we're gonna have greens, we're gonna have protein in your plate, we're gonna have veggies in our plate, etc. Now, I wanted to do that early in my career, and I realized it's not going to work with South Asians because, we're very like, okay, I'm going out to with my friends tonight, and there's a curry. How do I manage that, right? You're not going to tell them just balance your plate with this. There's going to be certain rules that you got to manage. So I love the macro side of things because, firstly, as I mentioned earlier, we undereat protein significantly. So I feel like the awareness as soon as you track macros is you start to understand, oh wow, I wasn't actually consuming this amount of protein previously. So you come to a conclusion of how much protein you're getting in. You understand like where you're overeating and undereating. Quite often, most people obviously overeat, whether it's through their fats or whether it's through carbohydrates. And again, our South Asians, we probably don't predominantly do overdo on the fats and carbohydrates. So we probably end up consuming on average over 80 grams of fats. Carbs would be whatever. Protein would be significantly under, close to 100. Hence why I think the skinny fat problem with our South Asians. But as a business and as a team, how we look at it is looking at calories and macronutrients. And this is where I find the education being better with clients. Like in my career, in the last 7 years, 7 years of me coaching, we've had about 25 clients become coaches because their education from like month 1 to month 7 has gone up significantly. Because we want to give them the answers rather than me suppressing and saying, yeah, don't worry about macros or whatever. In fact, I got asked that question today in one of my check-ins. Like, hey, so what's the science behind like my numbers and why do I have these numbers, etc. So we're very transparent in our education with it. So we look at protein, again, anywhere between 0.8 to 1.2 grams per body weight in pounds. Again, depends on if you're a vegan, vegetarian. Certain people have intolerances. We look exactly to the T because if someone's like, I don't eat dairy and I'm a vegan and I'm this, I'm that, like we have to be very specific to that. And then carbs and fats really can, be varied. But again, depends on like, does someone love more fats initially? Like you can tell from their nutrition profile, and then we tailor it towards that.
When you come up with these macro calories, is that based on body weight or ideal body weight? And then you do kind of work backwards to figure out how many grams and how many calories you need in each of those categories?
Yeah, we look at their body weight initially. So we look at their current body weight versus what they would be like lean wise. And then like obviously if someone's like 300 pounds, they don't need to have like 300 grams of protein. At that point we can even go like 0.6 grams per body weight because they just don't need that much protein anyway. And then we can balance it. So calories wise, there's a chart between 1 and like let's say 18 or 10 to 18. So 18 being like a muscle building calorie range. You times that, well, times your body weight and times it to that 18 number, 14 being maintenance, 10 being like, I'm in a deficit. We can start anywhere between that range, depending on like your look, injury history, and as well as that, like what's going on specifically with your needs as well. Like guys especially don't want to like lose. They want to lose, but guys also want to be like 180 pounds, and jacked, right? But in truth is you'll be 140 pounds, right? So it's about like accepting that at the same time. So it's about working on those specific numbers, maybe giving them a bit more food. Women, on the other hand, are like, hey, I want to be 10 pounds down by tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. And that's me generalizing, but that's just what we've seen.
Yeah. Explain that concept to me a little bit because I want to be what you just said. I want to be 180 pounds inject. And the biggest I ever was probably 100, 180, 185 pounds. And I started running a couple of years ago, a couple marathons in, and I went down to 155. And my wife's like, dude, you're too skinny. Like, put on some muscle again. So how do I know my number? Like, what is my comfortable number? Should I be putting on more mass to get to that number? Or you said I could be 140 and just fine. Is that not too thin?
It can be depending on like, it depends on like also what your labs are saying. Like we've seen people who, like we have a guy called, if you go on my Instagram page right now, there's a guy who's pinned and he's a cardiologist as well. His name's Omar. And I always tell people, what do you think his body weight is? And people are like, 150, 140. I'm like, he was 125 pounds lean. And they're like, whoa, right? And then his labs were like really, really good at that point as well. So sometimes it's to do with like labs as well. However, a lot of our clients are naturals. And what I mean by that is that they're not taking any performance enhancing drugs or steroids or whatever. It's very, very, very difficult for someone to just be 108 pounds or 190, 200 pounds and shredded. And if they are, like a lot of people ask me, how do you know someone's on steroids? And I'm like, I look at their number, I look at their height, and I'm like, does it make sense or not? If it doesn't make sense to me, then they're on something. At the same time, one of our most jacked clients, his name is Nuwan. He's also another doctor from New York. He was 148 pounds, right? But he doesn't look 148 pounds at all. In fact, people were like, I thought he's like 190. I'm like, no, he's 104. So it also depends on like your overall muscle tissue as well at the same time and how you look. So I always tell people spend a lot longer in a muscle building phase and bulking up. That means sometimes you're going to accumulate a bit more body fat. However, sometimes there's two camps. Some people are like, I don't want to gain too much body fat. Therefore, your strength will always plateau at a certain body weight. So I think sometimes you have to take yourself towards a fluffier end. Now, the issue with this is if you're getting older, let's say you're late 40s, 50s, this can obviously compromise your health. So sometimes I have to have those tough conversations with clients at that age. I'm like, look, we're not going to be able to gain, 10, 15 pounds of new muscle tissue. It's going to take years, realistically. And I think honesty is always worked for me personally. But yeah.
So what does it look like when a client comes to you for the first time? What does that
Yep.
intake kind of look like between a video? Because you're based out of in London. If someone's in New York trying to, connect with you, what does that intake look like? How do you get labs? And then what are the first few critical changes you try to implement in their lives?
Yeah, good question. By the way, we're obviously coming to New Jersey this summer as well. We have more American clients than Brits. It's crazy. I had a guy from London go to me, "Do you have any trainers in London?" I'm like, "We are British, by the way." And he goes, "Oh, I thought you guys are American." So we get both of that at the moment. But so the way it works is someone would inquire, they'd have a free consultation, similar to like us having a conversation right now. And the whole purpose would be to understand if we're the right fit for each other. Because ultimately, if you wanted to, let's say, you wanted to go and do marathon running, I'd be like, oh, I don't know if I can help you. Although we have helped someone with marathon running, but it's not our speciality, and I don't want you to pay for something that you may think, man, I didn't get the value that I wanted. And what we tend to do is we help people get in the best shape of their life. So if they're like, I want to lose 10, 15 pounds, or I want to get shredded, or I want to do something that, then we help them that. So we established a goal. And a lot of people usually come to us and like, hey, I want to lose like the magic 10 pounds. But in truth, it's usually like a double, but they're just afraid to commit to a bigger goal. We establish their wants, their needs with nutrition and where they're going wrong. And at that point, they understand our program. We're a word of mouth business. So typically, we've never actually done any like paid advertising or anything like that. We've only grown through like word of mouth. So people already have heard about us through a friend, which they know like about nutrition. And then typically, we have a three-system approach, which is accountability. We have the nutrition side of things, and we do the workout side of things. So it's three in one with us guys, and therefore, we basically tailor everything towards that. So when payment's done, then they have to fill in an application form, and with the application form, that's when we really dissect their lifestyle, and then we create the plan for them.
And
And then
how often do you connect with the clients? Like, do you see them work out? You take pictures of them, obviously, before and after. And how do you kind of monitor what they're eating?
Yeah, good question. So, from a workout perspective, we have like it could be anywhere between 3 to 4 training sessions per week, anywhere between 45 minutes to an hour. They will actually upload videos of what they're doing. So this is one of the things about us guys where our goal is to prevent injury as much as we can, because obviously we're virtual. Even though we have people who've got trainers, they still have even terrible injuries because we see what they're doing wrong potentially. So we get them to upload videos. We then do video feedback at that same time where we go through like, okay, why don't you change this? Why don't you do this? And then we give them the feedback. We connect with each individual, and we have a big check-in as well each week. And then check-in is something that they'll either send a video to us or they'll like a written response. We would then give the video feedback. And this is typically where we analyze and then we can make changes accordingly to this as well. We can connect with the client anywhere between 5 to 10 times a week, if not more, depends on the individual. Like if someone's like, because we have a chat function within our app, which allows them to connect with the coach throughout the week as well. So it's not just like, here's a check-in. Like you could be going out tonight to a restaurant. You're like, what do I do? Here's what you can do. Here's why we can get better. And then you report back the following day, whatever. So where we are quite good with it is we want regular communication. With nutrition, we have a spreadsheet, which is not that sexy, but it's quite good because it's actually worked amazingly well with our clients. Where we have like a drop-down option of protein, fats, carbs. You can create the things you'd like as well. So one of our things is that we will never say no to you guys going out. And if we do, you can fire us. So with clients, a lot of our clients have got kids, they've got busy lifestyles, and they want to keep going out. None of them are bodybuilders, or they're not like this for them. What they do here is like a byproduct of like just day to day. It's not like, I'm focused on having just chicken, broccoli, and rice, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah.
So I hope that answers the question.
Talk to me about that a little bit. The going out, the being social. We live in New York, you live in London. We do this, right? We like to go out to dinner.
Yeah.
I want to ask about how some of your clients are managing that. How is it affecting their social lives? Are they able to go out? And the second question is about alcohol use. We know I've done podcasts on how alcohol kills testosterone. It kills muscle protein synthesis. Obviously, it's deleterious for us. So
Yep.
if I were recommending someone to drink or not to drink, I would say don't drink, obviously. But where does that kind of fit into your algorithm?
So when I was younger, when I first started, when I was like maybe 16 to 18, I was very like black and white with my thinking. I was very like, I'm never going to drink. And then you go to a wedding, you go to a party, and you're like, someone's like, hey, have a drink with me today, whatever. And you're like, you know what? Yeah, why not? And it flipped my thinking. And I'm like, if I can get into that, imagine a client, right? Client's going to get even worse pressures because they're not a coach. No one even knows what they're doing. Some people keep it hidden. So I was like, you know what? Alcohol is not bad. It's just how you manage it realistically, right? So we have some people who love a good beer, some people who love a good whiskey, some people who like. So we will give them rules on how to manage things. So we'll be like, okay, if you're gonna have like a drink, let's go for clear spirits. Let's go for your gins, your vodkas, because that will again allow you to actually drink a bit more, but within reason, and you're not basically drinking all of your calories. So at that point, moderation for us is really, really big when it comes down to alcohol, because for me, the best thing is someone who can actually still have parts of their old lifestyle with the new and get a result. For them, it means they can actually stick to this a lot longer.
Mhm.
One of the things we see with our clients is they're not gaining, like they don't lose body weight and then they're like gaining another 25 pounds back again within 6 months, because we want to avoid that.
Mhm.
So if I said to them, don't drink, and people will be like, yeah, I won't drink because I want to get a result with you guys. But then it wouldn't do anything for me in 6 months down the line or a year down the line, because they'll just regain all that body weight back. So that's an issue. And when it comes down to like socials, again, we don't necessarily count macros when they're going out. We have frameworks. So frameworks would be like, okay, one plate rule. Now, why do we have the one plate rule? Because it caps your calories for the day rather than like, okay, eat whatever you want. You can have 2, 3 plates of this, right? If you go to an Indian wedding, there's gonna be an auntie who's gonna be like, have a bit more, have a bit more, So we're very much like, okay, one plate rule. Then within the one plate rule, we're like, okay, if you're going to an Indian wedding, you're not gonna get protein, so don't worry about protein. Like go for a curry, quarter plate curry, quarter plate something like rice instead of like roti, because the rice is better in terms of volume. And there's always a side salad, right? It'll always be like lettuce and carrots or whatever. Make sure most of your plate is with that. So your plate looks really, really filling. So then no auntie's telling you, hey, why are you not eating today?
Right.
At that point, people go there. We want them to either maintain their body weight, or typically we say to them, let's not gain more than a certain amount. So because maintenance is a range, it's never like one number. And I think sometimes people get very much like caught up in like, hey, so I gained 0.5 pounds. Like, is that really bad? Like, no, that's actually a good thing. It's not a bad thing at all. So we give them that range, and then the goal is to get back to normal as soon as you're back. Even on vacation, like vacation is also certain rules that we'd give. Spring breaks coming up as well. So we've got loads of clients right now who are like, hey, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. What do you think I should do? And we want people to go away quite often with us because they learn. Like if you're going to India, that's perfect for us because go to the motherland and understand how to have your Indian food and enjoy it. If you're going to Puerto Rico, how do you enjoy that? All inclusives. So we've dealt with every single type. But its frameworks is really important at this point.
Yeah,
Versus
I think what you said is important. Once you make something too restrictive, and certainly it's going to work, right? The Atkins diet used to work. You did 2 weeks of induction, everybody lost weight. But you're so strict that when you revert back to your normal lifestyle, you just gain all the weight back. So having some rules of framework, I think, is very critical. I mean, are there cheat days? If I'm really strict 5 days a week, am I allowed a cheat day, or is it still I should try my best to abide within that framework of the rules?
Yeah, that's a good question. So one of the best things about our program is that you can make things work within your numbers. So if you said, I fancy Chick-fil-A tonight, but you've got 500 calories left, you can actually make Chick-fil-A work for you. And that's where like people don't. So we've had people who've actually had like Chick-fil-A every week in their program and still lost 50 pounds. And that becomes for them like, holy crap, I can't believe I had Chick. Because some people do Chick-fil-A like on Saturdays with their kids. They're like, it's a tradition. And one of the things that when they sign up to us, they're like, I don't want to stop that. And I was like, you don't need to. We'll make it work within your numbers. They do that, and they're like, holy crap. I've had Chick-fil-A and I've lost a bunch of body weight. So it's not necessarily we have like one cheat day or cheat meal. Well, technically we have a cheat meal structure, but it's make it work within your numbers. And our saying is have your cake, but just don't have the whole cake.
Right.
Have the slice and you can enjoy it.
I feel like we should have started the podcast with weekly Chick-fil-A and still lose weight. And all my listeners would have been very, very excited about what to hear next. I want to go back to one other concept with the macros related to protein.
Yep.
A few weeks ago, I published a podcast on protein intake and how much protein to eat, what the recommendations are by our American College of Sports Medicine, the American Heart Association. Growing up, it used to be a gram per kilogram. Then people said, all right, it's a gram per pound. Or if you're working out a lot, it could be 1.8 grams per pound. What are some of the rules that you've seen? And more importantly, what are the things that you implement with your clients that have tended to work?
Yeah. I think with bodybuilders, they're a lot more specific. So they're very much like, I need to get 38 grams of protein in per meal because that's what the science says or whatever. Like I think with general population, our goal, we're fighting is adherence. That's the problem, right? So we want someone just to be as adherent as they possibly can do and just get all their meals in. Like, so initially the struggles we see with people when they first join is they can't consume as much food. Why? Because our protein is a lot higher. And also on top of that, our fiber content is way higher when we give them the meal plan. They're like, no, are you sure I'm having so much more calories? You're not. You're only having like 1,600 calories, but they were having way more beforehand, but they've lost 3 pounds. And like, how the hell did I lose 3 pounds? And so we go with the range of like I said, depends on someone's body weight initially. And as well as that, like what their current nutrition looks like. So if someone eats chicken, fish, etc., they can tolerate a lot more protein. So even close to like 1.2. We've never really gone up to like 1.8 because we've just seen people struggle. South Asians, I find, struggling anyway with protein. I don't know what it is because again, it's just consuming a lot more in general through like maybe dairy, the shakes, more chicken or more fish or whatever. So we find that we can range between 0.6 all the way to like 1.2 within that range per body weight in pounds. And it's never been an issue. Now, as the journey goes on, it depends on the individual. And let's say if someone's got a photo shoot with us, we may even bring that down slowly, the protein content, because if someone's at 150 pounds, but then they're now at 130, we don't need that extra 20 grams of protein. We can use that towards the carbohydrates or maybe even more fats. And typically that we've never seen an issue with someone like some of our most jacked dudes are not even consuming more than like, you'll be shocked. They'll be having like maybe 140 grams of protein. So what we find
that sounds like a lot though, right? 140 grams of protein without a shake. Like I'm trying to think about what I eat. I do eat some meat and fish and chicken, but I also have 2 shakes a day. I can't imagine getting 100 plus grams without a shake.
Yeah, like I'm having at the moment myself personally, I'm having 150, 160 grams of protein. Now I get meal prep delivered to me. And my meals today were scrambled eggs, and I'm only having 3 meals a day, and my other 2 meals are just chicken. Both for chicken and sweet potato and chicken and like broccoli, which is boring, but I don't mind it. And it's just I have no shake with it. So I think you can make it work. It just depends on how much you want to consume from meat. Realistic. If you're vegetarian, it's a different story because you've got your mock meats, which not everyone does well with. You've also got then your shakes. Shakes now are way better than they were 10 years ago. 10, 15 years ago, like people were like, oh, I don't know if I want to have this. It's not great in terms of quality and so on. Like most people didn't do well with protein shakes. Nowadays, the quality of shakes are way, way, way better than I mean, there's still some people like, I don't want, like people come to us and like, I never want to have a shake.
Right.
At that point, we've already accepted they're going to have less protein. That's fine.
Right.
So, there's going to be trade-offs here and there.
Going back to some of the diet nutrition strategies, certainly we've talked about the content, how much to eat in certain macro calories, etc. What about the way we eat? There's a big move about intermittent fasting. Where do you guys land on that? How have you seen that shake out with some of your clients if they do practice intermittent fasting?
Yeah, intermittent fasting is really popular recently. I mean, I was doing it maybe 6, 7 years ago initially, and even I got caught up in the whole like I'm gonna fast for 20 hours, I'm gonna have a 4-hour eating window. And frankly speaking, I don't think you need to do that if you want to get result. Now, fasting, there's benefits. We already know about them. I mean, it depends on why are you doing it is probably the question I'll ask that individual. Now, I don't eat until like 11 o'clock in the morning. But when I tell people that, they think, oh, you're intermittent fasting. I'm like, no, I just prefer to work on my business in the morning and I don't want to have my meals initially as well, right? So when people come to us and they're like, Kunal, I want to do intermittent fasting, we're not against it. We're like, you can do it, but we just let them know it's a tool. It's not necessarily like the main driver for fat loss. At the end of the day, we've got to understand, are you in a deficit or are you not in a deficit, right? Like I know people who've never done intermittent fasting and got absolutely in the best shape of their life. And I know people who've done intermittent fasting and they've still got in the best shape of life. So it's about how can you make it work for you and your lifestyle? I think with business owners, it works really well because they're like, hey, dude, I don't want to eat like first thing in the morning. I'm like, yeah, great. Me too. I don't eat first thing in the morning. And then I'll have my meal late in the afternoon and then a lot of my meals. Then it also depends on like when you want to have your last meal. If you want to like, I prefer to have my last meal before 7 because it just gets my resting heart rate a lot lower. I can sleep a lot better, etc. So it just depends on like how you want to work around intermittent fasting. But when people tell me I use it for fat loss, typically it just doesn't work.
In terms of body fat percentage, is there two questions? Is there a target that you would like clients to get to show that, the program is working? And question two, is there too low of a body fat? I mean, we know, especially in women and now in men with the female athlete triad or the changes in hormones and menstrual periods, there's a fine balance between getting too, quote, skinny, too little body fat and being in the appropriate zone. How do you guys balance that?
So we never look at DEXA is a really popular thing nowadays, I personally think, and it's probably the best way to measure body fat in my opinion. So when people go and at your Equinox and like, hey, I got this test done, I'll be like, I couldn't be bothered about this, the number, respectfully, because it's probably off by like 10%, maybe even more than that. But in terms of body fat, there is no specific number. And the reason I say that is because we're not like, hey, you need to get down to 8% body fat. Now, a lot of guys in general sometimes are like, I would love to get to 8% once in my life, for example. And, everyone wants to kind of celebrate that. With women as well, for us, it's never like you need to get down to like 16% or 15% body fat, or whatever. It's more like, are you beating your before look? So we compare the before and after. I'm like, hey, are you beating that? And we compare and contrast those changes, and whether it's through clothes, whether it's through like labs, for example, whether it's through comments on the street, like your mom saying, hey, you look amazing, whatever. Like those things also, play a huge role into that. But there isn't like a specific body fat number because it's always going to be off. Because unless you do a DEXA scan and you do a DEXA scan every other, I don't know, 3 months, then I think that will be the most accurate. But frankly speaking, like, and again, we also look at pictures and we're like, yeah, this person may need another 5 pounds to go, because body fat is not just in one area. It's not just in your front. You may have more in your lower back, which you don't know about. Most people don't know about their lower back, or they don't know, like women in their glutes, in their hamstrings, they don't know about that. They just think, oh, everything's in my midsection and my hips, which it could be, but at the same time, you don't even know how much you're carrying in your glutes or your legs, shoulders, your face. And that's another like factor that comes into it as well. But this is where like the weekly check-ins, the accountability helps, because we have these discussions.
Right. From a medical standpoint, I give this a lecture about core strengthening, and I tell everyone in the audience, everybody here has a six-pack. We all have a six-pack. It's just, sometimes it's being protected by a layer of fat. I would like to get down to 8%. That'd be great. One time in my life, that'd be fantastic. So we might have to connect. But I feel like your philosophy is more than just about the aesthetic. It's not just getting a six-pack or getting down to 8% body fat. It's also about creating a healthy lifestyle. So how are you managing that? You look at the pictures, you look at the workouts. How else are you saying, okay, you're actually healthier than you were 6 months ago? What are some metrics you implement?
So we partnered up with, funny enough, Amit Pooja, who founded a company called Health PR, which is to assess labs. And basically we started to look at like, how can we implement labs initially? And because what happens is, in America, you guys are great because you guys get physicals done every single year. And we've worked with so many, and what tends to happen is that people are like, hey, just got my labs done, and can you believe it, Kunal? They told me just carry on what I'm doing. I'm in the best shape of my life, just not physically, but also internally. So for me, that's where the satisfaction is now, because, I've gone through so many transformations. Like I personally work with over 500 clients individually in my career. I've done over 200 plus photo shoots by myself. I've seen the physical side of things, but for me, it's like the longevity space is really intriguing to me now. So looking at things like HRV, looking at things like resting heart rate, your respiratory rate, like through the Whoop, Oura rings, like these are things that now are so accessible to us. It's like, wow. And we've actually got like a LinkedIn, we've got it linked in our app as well, where you can, link your wearables into it. So we can look at things like other data, which can measure, like, I guess, your well-being and longevity at the same time. Shout out Brian Johnson, who I think obviously is crazy, but at the same time, is changing the game from a health perspective right now. And I'm loving like what he's doing with the health space. And I like the idea for us now to help clients to move into that as well. But the problem is to get to that, you need to first get a result because you need to believe in it. Otherwise, if you lose 5 pounds, you're never going to believe about longevity because
Right.
you're just going to be back to square one. So for us, we don't really focus on that until we get into like different phases within our program. And then at that point, we're like, okay, how can we improve your HRV if it's at 50, right? Now, how can we get to 70,
Mhm.
right? What do we need to do to calm your nervous system down, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a matter of like time as well, and then the buy-in within the program. But it takes time. It just can't happen straight away, I think.
Right. There's so much data out there, these biometrics that come through these wearables that you mentioned, and there's a risk. There's data for the sake of data, and there's true data that's meaningfully impacting a healthy lifestyle. So I think it's great that you're kind of balancing and looking at the bigger picture. I've seen all of your successes. I'm going to send, the viewers and listeners to your Instagram to show the before and after pictures. Tell me a little bit about failures. Are there some clients that just haven't done as well as you think, and why do you think that is? What are some of those reasons?
Yeah, so we have a 75% success rate on like the before and afters you guys may see on Instagram and websites and stuff. We have 85% success on people want to lose anywhere between like 10 to 15 pounds. So when people come to us, that's like the bare minimum they'll end up getting. Anyway, now where failures could happen typically is someone can just ghost you and they're like, they sign up and you just don't hear from them like, I don't know, 4 weeks down the line and you're like, what's going on? Are you okay? Etc. So those are like one. I think communication and not communicating enough. One of the things we always say, we have 3 layers of communication or success with communication. So level 1 is someone who just checks in. Level 2 is we have someone who checks in and uploaded videos. And level 3, we have someone who checks in, uses the chat function and upload videos. That's like we've seen a high level of success when people do level 3. And we've actually made it like a big deal when we tell them initially, we're like, hey, look, can you do this, this, this? And they're like, yeah, it actually looks doable. And as soon as everyone starts doing that, like I'm talking about busy professionals that we end up having, and they end up doing that, they get good results. So I think communication is one. People can ghost you, is another one. And that's, to be honest, frankly speaking, that's probably it because we cater everything towards them, if that makes sense. It's never like you come to us and you're gonna have to eat chicken, rice, and broccoli. That's it. Right. Because then we never have a vegan, we never have a vegetarian
Right.
so we have every, and we've got resolved with every like person in terms of like if someone's a vegan, someone's a business owner, someone's got 3 kids, someone who travels a lot, like we've done it with every single kind of type of client.
Right.
So I'd say those two is probably like two standouts, I'd say.
I think, what you said is important, especially, I just gave a talk on building a medical practice, and one of the foundations in patient compliance is communication. Tell the patient what you're going to do it, check in with them, make sure they're doing it. And when you do that, patients tend to comply with some of their care. Seems like you're kind of using the same philosophies with your program. In terms of exiting KMAC, what does that look like? Do patients are not patients, are clients forever? Or do you say, listen, I've taught you whatever you need to learn, live your life. And in that setting, how many continue to progress? Or is there some percentage that revert back to the pre-KMAC life?
Yeah, good question. So we have 4 phases in our journey. So I'll quickly explain 4 phases. So first 2 phases is first phase is more like build habits. The second phase is where like the majority of your results going to come through. We call it acceleration because you'll accelerate quicker with us than you would by yourself. And then after that, we have priming phase 2.0, which is really focused on reversing well and not gaining, as I mentioned, 25 pounds in like 6 months again. And then we have phase 4, which is either muscle building or a lifestyle. Now, this is typically where we ask the client, what do you want? And if they're like, hey, I've lost 50 pounds, I'm really happy. I want to learn how now to like basically not gain 50 pounds ever again. And then what we do is we actually sit down with them and have an exit date of like, here's when you're going to leave KMAC Fitness. Does that sound good to you? So the next 4 months, we want to achieve this, 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 and then you can go and leave us going forward. We also have a rule, which is we never want to see you ever again, if that makes sense. That's respectfully. So when people are like, really? But people love it because they're like, at least we appreciate the honesty. Because I want you to go away. Like this is the only training program that you'll ever need. All right. And you've done it. You're like, I'm in a really good spot. And the proof is in the pudding because also you get the results. But also, like I said, I've had over 25 of my own clients become coaches in one way, shape, or another. So I think that's how we work around it. We're not against the exit date. On average, though, most of our clients with the data we've had is about 22 months is they end up doing with us. Because again, we have a rule which is like, if you want to come back, it has to be special circumstances. And what the other question you asked me is like, how many people regain? It's very little, but then again, I wouldn't know because we'd speak to them, etc. But sometimes they may not come back to us, if that makes sense. Maybe like, let me just go there because I'm scared of speaking to Kunal, whatever. We had a lady, funny enough, from Ohio. Her best friend's with us. She's been with us for 2 years. She didn't sign up to us, but she went to another program. And one of my teammates who asked her, like, why didn't you come to us then? She goes, I was just really scared because you guys have really high standards. And I was like, yeah, but you just had to pay more money now, right? We realize that like we're double the price compared to these guys. So a lot of times it's like we do want people to go away, have the education, and we don't hide anything from our clients from an education perspective. We, in fact, we have a member site which is full of education, the weekly updates, the community, and that's the community is where people connect with other people and becomes a game changer.
That's great. I love that. I never want to see you again. No offense. I like that. That's words of encouragement. Say, I'm trying to give you the tools to live your life in a healthier space. Last question about South Asians in specific. I know that you kind of the thesis was let's get South Asians healthier because that's what you noticed. What is it about South Asians other than our diet? Is there something genetic in our bodies that kind of prevent us from building muscle as faster as other races? And how do you kind of biohack that with your program?
I think I would say, look, we carry more visceral body fat. I mean, I think there's studies from my local hospital that came out maybe in 2017 that we carried 30% more body fat than any other race, which is scary. But I also believe, for my own kind of, without any science, this is me just kind of like spitballing. We just haven't had enough protein in our lives until the last maybe 10 years, right? 10 to 15 years. So you can see where the skinny fat side of things has popped up. You can see why it's harder for us to build more muscle mass. We have less probably, fast twitch fibers, in my opinion. Hence why we struggle with it. I think though, our kids and our grandkids and stuff will be okay. In fact, you'll see them like, in hopefully 50 to 70 years time, you'll be like, holy crap, like he's jacked or she's jacked, or like, and they just start training. So I think it will change like quite quickly because there's so many South Asians now taking charge of their health, which is beautiful to see. And I think it's we have actually our mission statement, which is one person, one family, one generation at a time through the physical and mental. Because we believe with this one person that we work with, it's going to impact, their family, then it's going to impact the generation after them. And we have people who share pictures of their kids in the gym. You mentioned your son having protein shake. We have that all the time. Like, hey, guess what? My son's having a shake. Can you believe it? Or we see videos and their kids are training with them at the back.
Yeah.
So I do believe that now, it's going to be a lot easier for kids. And I'm hoping we see also more South Asians in sports, right? That would be I wanted to be in cricket and football, to be honest, but it didn't happen. But I do hope in the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to see, a South Asian kid in college who's a D1 quarterback, right? That would be amazing. Someone who's in the NBA. I mean, we've had, I think, a couple in the NBA, but they're from India, right? Which is still amazing. But I only see someone who's maybe from the States and who their mom or dad, they grow up and they're having like, they're into fitness. Like LeVar Ball was interesting to me because he was like, I was a personal trainer, right? No wonder his kids were into basketball. So if we have someone who's South Asian who does the same thing and they're like, yeah, I was always in the gym like 20 years ago, and then the kids are just used to that, I think we'll see that maybe. That's my prediction in about 20, 30 years time.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think, I'm first generation or what we call second generation American. My parents came from India. The emphasis was math, science. That's what you did. You didn't play sports. I mean, luckily I played basketball and I was fortunate, but most kids in my generation did not pursue sports as a primary work. It was mostly academics. But yeah, I mean, we have an Indian in the NBA, we have an Indian in the NHL, MLB. So I think things are changing, and I think health and fitness and just changes in our lifestyle are the way to do it. So I appreciate your thoughts on that. How do people get in touch with you? Are you still taking on new clients? Are you overbooked, or how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so we have a waiting list at the moment. So our waiting list is about 2 weeks, 3 weeks at the moment. And because obviously we don't want to compromise the quality. We've actually had a waiting list since like last June before we came to the States. So if anyone wants to inquire, head to Instagram, which is at KMAT Fitness. And you can DM me. And the other one would be like go on the website. You can actually book in a link for a free consultation. There's 2-3 slots available, and what I mean by 2-3 calendars, I should say. So one's like if you're on the West Coast, It's easy for you to book in the evening, so you can speak to someone in the evening. And then if you're on the East Coast, if you want to speak to someone in the afternoon or your morning, you can also do that as well for us. So yeah, I personally, I'm not taking on as many clients as you can imagine. I'm running the business and stuff, but we have a team, a very, very good team, which hence why we're getting all of these results as well.
Super. Kunal, K-Mac, I appreciate you coming on and sharing your insights and your program and your philosophies. I think that's, you know, the viewers and listeners are going to have a lot to think about and take in. I agree with things that you're saying. You know, it's all about primarily diet and nutrition. We focus a lot about cardio and aerobics and treadmill work, but I think we just need to take a step back and look at what really informs our health, and that is what we put into our bodies. So making those small little changes are going to be critical. So thanks for coming on to the backstory and sharing your thoughts. And thank you out there to the listeners who have tuned in. We will be sure to share K-Mac's contact information through the episode notes. And until then, we've got your back. Thank you.